At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Vance, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, I'm excited to have you here. I think this will be an interesting conversation. I know that you're very focused on business, and that's your main approach. And yet, what I have found so often is the two intermingle, business and personal intermingle. I'd love for you to kind of share your background, who you are, and a little bit about that.
So my name is Dr. Vance Cooper, born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm a leadership development consultant. My background is primarily from healthcare. I've been in the healthcare industry for about 15 years. My experience in healthcare has stemmed from long-term care services, also inpatient mental health services. So I've worked on a psych unit for the last 10 years as well. And outside of my healthcare work, I do leadership development workshops and trainings and seminars. My goal is to help people, individuals, unlock unrealized leadership potential within themselves in an authentic way. So that's just a little bit about me and some of the things that I have going on and what I do.
Oh, okay. So as you talk about healthcare, and are you a an MD?
No, no. So I'm actually I have my PhD in corporate leadership. So my PhD is actually not in healthcare. So my responsibility, so I do admissions and business development. So a lot of my experience has been in intake as an admissions director for long-term care facilities. So admitting patients, reviewing clinical, making sure that the insurances are in network, making sure everything's lined up for the patients to admit to the rehab facility. And then also the same thing for in the behavioral health, screening patients coming from, the hospital I work for we have older adult and adult behavioral health. We take voluntary, involuntary admissions as well. If you can imagine it, I've seen it when it comes to admitting patients. And so yeah, so I'm responsible for managing our admissions process, making sure that the patients meet criteria, verifying all the insurances, making sure everybody's authorized, and then also making sure that the community is aware of our behavioral health services. So that's really my response,
Okay.
what my healthcare career looks like.
I imagine though that you glean a lot of information because you're not just sitting there
Absolutely.
at a desk.
Absolutely. I always joke around with a lot of my friends and say that mental health is one of those medical specialties where you see so many unique cases where there's truly one of one. Like you'll see the case one time, you'll never see anything like it ever again.
Well, and one of the things you comment about in your bio that you sent to me is, and let me see if I can read it here because I like it. You're helping them unlock their unrealized leadership potential within themselves without compromising authenticity. And when I read that, what really hit me is so often, and I've seen this in reality here, so often we have someone who is an individual, and yet when they get into a business situation, a leadership situation, all of a sudden they become a different person. And I've observed that very personally with people that either I've known or one of my brothers has known. My brother saying, "Oh, they are so wonderful. They're so kind. They have this great sense of humor." And all of a sudden you watch them talk and their background is a lawyer, and all of a sudden they are just stern and they're talking, and you don't see any of that real personality. And you find that that's the case with people, not only in leadership and business, but in general.
No, very much so. I am a firm believer that you should never be compromising who you are. I think that there are definitely situations where your natural wiring. I mean, we all have a natural way that we're wired and uniquely wired. And so I do think that there are going to be situations and circumstances where you have to adapt to your environment, that's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
But whenever you find yourself in a situation where you have to adapt for too long, it's almost always going to become overwhelming. For some people, it might take a year. Some people, it might take, a couple minutes, couple an hour, 10 years. But at some point, it's going to become a little overwhelming and you're going to start overcompensating.
Well, and how often do you see someone living a life that's not really theirs? They're living a life that society says they need to be, or all of the other backgrounds. It can be family, it can be religion, it can be all of those type of things. School, this is who you should be. And you see people living a life that is not really theirs.
No, all the time. I mean, all the time you see people where you people have a tendency to do the things that they think they can get or that they know that they can get. So if they see somebody else achieving or working on in a specific area, they say, hey, this person has success. I want to do that. And so they try to do it. And just because it's work for somebody doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for you because everybody's unique. We all have our own special talents, and that just might not be your talent. You might be adapting to a situation where you're not operating in your natural gift. So it's dependent upon ourselves, and it's our responsibilities to really be able to figure out what our leadership gift is so that we're not focused on trying to chase somebody else's gift or somebody else's dream.
And when someone is just really living someone else's life or what they think they should be, how often do you see that, or have you observed that that can create some psychological as well as emotional issues for them, where they're experiencing depression and they don't know why, or those type of things? Have you observed that at all?
Absolutely. I see it all the time, especially working in the mental health space. Though, of course, I do want to disclaim I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but being that I work with these professionals on a day-to-day basis and I'm around so many patients that are dealing with challenges, you see it all the time where people have it could be something that it could be a various experience that they've had. Sometimes it could be something that they might have seen their friends do, something they might have seen their family member, they might have seen them have some success in. And the minute they can't figure out who they are, what their purpose is, and it really can weigh down on a person. And sometimes when you haven't gone through that self-discovery process, as I like to call it, because that's really what leadership is a self-discovery process. If you haven't done that, it really can put you in a situation where you really don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And when you don't really have a purpose, when you think that life or what you're going through, you're feeling worthless or you're feeling helpless, it can lead to depression. It can lead to anxiety. It can lead to other physical health conditions that really have a detrimental effect on you.
Well, and I've really been focusing on this whole concept a bit. In fact, I'm starting a whole new little program for social media called Dr. Doug Reflects, A Quiet Return. And the whole point is that so often we don't realize who we are. I mean, you can even get into theologically a little bit about that, but who we are has been so hidden from us, I think, in many cases, to the point that we have the guilt, we have the shame, we have all of that and don't recognize who we are. How do you help someone in leadership, but also, as I say, because I used to do some small business consulting, there's no question that helping someone in a leadership situation helps them in their own life, also in a personal situation. And how do you help someone, in your experience, to discover who they really are and recognize that divinity within them, the goodness within them, the fact that, yes, they are good individuals?
Well, I think that it all starts with that vision. that big vision. And I think that, quite frankly, most people never really sit down and take the time to really figure out what that big vision that they have for their lives is. And so when you don't have that vision, and when we're saying vision, we're not talking about sight. We're talking about that big vision, that thing that you can't really see, that thing that you're supposed to do, that purpose. And so if you don't have a big vision that you're working towards, it really, it's almost like you're moving through life, focus on what you think you can get or what you know you can get. There's no real purpose, there's no real meaning. And so you really want to be able to figure out what that deeper meaning is and what that big vision is for your life. Because like you said, everybody, a vision was instilled in every single person on this planet. And usually it'll take some sort of either some experience, some sort of outside catalyst to really kind of be able to bring that out, bring that vision out of us. But the key is to, by any means necessary, you have to figure out what that big vision is for your life, because it's that vision, those things that you're working towards. That's how you're going to be able to establish the goals and the things that you're working towards, so you can really find meaning and purpose in life.
And how does someone find that vision? I mean, it's one thing to talk about that, and we can do that all of the time. But how does someone who is struggling and is finding that they're not happy, and that's probably one of the first keys of awareness that, you know what, this is not the life I want. How do they go about, in your experience, discovering that vision so that at least that's the first step? Now they have the vision, and then from there, there's other processes.
I think the first step is really, you have to do a self-assessment. You have to really understand your natural wiring. That's how you really figure out who you are and why you're here. You have to really, and it's hard work. Like it's tough work, because sometimes it could take you a couple months, a couple years before you really are kind of, as you get to really know yourself. But I think that the key is really doing some sort of a self-assessment. So there's a number of different tools out here. Like, I know I use a tool called the flight assessment, which is a disc-based tool. You have the disc assessment, you have like Myers-Briggs, you have other types of assessments and things like that. And these assessments aren't necessarily me to tell you who you are, but I like to say that these are tools to be able to help you with that self-discovery process, so that you really can look in and learn more about yourself. Because as you learn about yourself, you're able to learn how you're different from other people, because we're all wired differently. It's not to say that there's no right or wrong way to be wired. It's just preferences and perspectives. And so the key is really being able to go through that self-discovery, like that self-assessment process, to really be able to figure out what's my strengths? What are my limitations? Who do I work with? Am I introverted? Am I extroverted? Do I like work? Am I more comfortable working with people? Am I more comfortable working behind the scenes and touching more so on the processes as it comes to things? So the key is really going through that self-assessment process to really figure out who you are. And that's the way you're able to figure out what your natural gifts are, and how you're able to work in a meaningful and an authentic manner.
Well, and I love that. I happen to be a certified behavioral analyst also, and I use something called People Keys, and you probably heard of that.
Okay.
Because when we talk about the DISC, there's some very shallow DISC personality tests, and I think the audience needs to understand that if you really want to get into what you were talking about, where you get into purpose, how do you want to be communicated with, all of those type of things, and what are your values, it gets into something like you're using or what I've used in the past. And it's interesting because as you do that, and I think it's important to work with someone to just review that as you're doing that, because that starts you to think, wow, in fact, I remember in one case, a study that I was looking at, excuse me, where they had two salespeople that they had hired, And one was just, both of them interviews were incredible, but one was just killing it. And the other one was really struggling, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. Finally, they brought in the assessment, and what they discovered was the one that was killing it had a value, an important value of economics. And the one that was not killing it, one of their important values was art, was that type of thing. And so he was really more focused on maybe that right brain creativity type of thing, whereas the other one was left brain, I'm going to get this done. And I think that people don't realize that, it isn't a perfect evaluation. And that's
Right.
why I think being able to talk to someone such as yourself, go through that, and, how do you feel about that? Does that feel right? Does not? But beginning to understand who, as you say, who they really are. I think what a key that is. And most people don't do that.
No, you are 100% right about that. The biggest key is having somebody that you're working with that's able to guide you through that process, because you're not really able to, if you're just taking an assessment and you don't have anybody that's going to be kind of walking you through it and asking you the questions that need to be asked. It's almost like you can just toss it to the side as just another meaningless assessment that you just you take, you don't really implement or utilize it. And when you have somebody that's kind of holding your hand and walking you through that process of self-discovery, that's really the key and really where the transformation takes place. It's not in doing it on your own.
Well, and that's where fear comes in. It was really interesting. I know I was working with a small company, and one individual that was kind of overseeing things, I said, you know what? They were really struggling with interaction with their employees and so forth. I said, we need to do this assessment. So we did it with the one individual. And I said, all right, now we need to do it with the owner. We need to do it with the boss, the CEO. They refused. And
Wow.
it was curious to me that sometimes if people find themselves not willing to do something like that, there's something going on subconsciously, that really they have this fear of discovering who they really are or accepting responsibility for their behavior and who they are.
You are 100% correct. I always say that a lot of times the primary reason that most people, and I mean, I can argue most people don't want to go through a self-assessment is because of exactly what you said. They might be scared of what they uncover about themselves. And sometimes when you're going through that self-discovery process, you might uncover that you're operating in a certain way because of something that it could be some traumatic experience that you had as a child, and that whole experience just has wired the way you operate and handle your relationships, whether that's professionally or personally, things of that nature. And so sometimes a coaching session could end up you with you needing to go to hire a therapist separately, because you might uncover some things about yourself that you really were kind of avoiding and running away from. So I think you're spot on with that.
Well, and as you start to work with people and as you're working with people to help them to become truly their authentic self, do you find that there's even another element there of change that becomes another obstacle that they need to overcome, a challenge that they face as far as a fear of change?
Yeah, I think some people are scared of change when in reality there's almost you can almost guarantee that things are going to change. Some things are going to change for the good. Sometimes it might change for the worse, but nonetheless, things are constantly changing. So um, I do think that some people are a little more resistant to changing, and so when you're resistant to change, it can lead to getting back to the stress and the depression and the over feeling overwhelmed. It really can take a toll on you when you avoid doing that inner work.
Well, and as you're working with someone, and let's talk about this. I'd love to hear some specific experiences that you've had where you've worked with someone, obviously in business. And again, I think for the audience, recognizing that whatever's going on in business from a personal level is the same with just life in general. But what stories can you share where you've worked with someone who was really struggling as a leader, and how on earth over a period of time were you able to help them to basically start to realize, just besides the assessment, understand who they were, and then start the process of making those changes, because that process itself isn't always easy.
Yeah, starting the process of making those changes is really the hardest part. I always recommend that people take baby steps. So it really starts with looking at your routine. That's one of the things that I always try to advise people to look at first. What does my daily routine look like? How are my daily habits helping me to accomplish that big vision, or helping me to accomplish those goals that I've set for myself? So I really think that things start with their routine. It's amazing how when people don't have a consistent routine that set them up for success, it's amazing how many people don't do that. So I think that that's something that's very important. I also think that it's very important that I think that something that's small, but a lot of people don't do, is actually writing goals down and having them in a place where you can actually, where you're going to look at them. So whether, for example, I'm in my desk right now, but if I look up, I have this basically this vision board of everything that I said that I want to accomplish over the course of this year. And I do that. That's just an activity that I've done for the last couple of years, that I started it was a couple of years ago, but I usually do it in January, and I just map out the whole year from January to December, and just, what is my goals? What types of problems am I going to be solving? How many people do I need to be speaking to? Those types of things are all on this board that I create. So I think that is very important, having something that you can visually see, because when you can, as people, we're visual. Well, most of us are, a good portion of us are visual learners, even when we try to say that we don't need to see it. But when you actually have these things written down on paper, what I've really learned is that it makes it feel real. Whereas sometimes when we have an idea or we have a goal that, oh, it's in my head, when you write that goal down, there's something about putting that pen to paper and being able to have it something in your face where you're able to see it. Not only does it make it feel real, it also makes you accountable to your goals as well, because it's something like, for example, like, I mean, I just said I started in January, and I have basically a timeline going into December. And do I expect that? I don't know that I'm going to accomplish every single thing that I wrote down, but one thing for sure is that I'm working towards it. And so if you don't have anything written down that you can work towards, it really has a way of making it a little bit less real, and if it's not as real, it makes it a little bit more difficult for you to hold yourself accountable to actually accomplishing and putting a plan in place to accomplish that goal.
Well, and we all talk about moving forward, setting these goals, moving forward. And one of the things that I found was that so oftentimes we don't realize how important it is to work backwards. And
Yes.
when I say that, whether it's business, and this is what I would do when I was working with smaller businesses, what is it your ultimate goal? What is it your ultimate vision? Or with an individual, what is it that you want out of life? What is that?
Yes.
Now, what I want you to do is envision that that's where you are. Now, I want you to go one step back. What's the thing that you need to do or to change in order for that to occur? And so they go, well, I probably need to do this or whatever. All right, now go one step back again and keep going one step back. And all of a sudden, it becomes really clear. And as you say, if you're writing those things down, all of a sudden you get back to the inner self. And it's like, okay, wow, I have this belief system that's been imprinted on me by society or environment or even DNA that is causing me to do these behaviors, which is causing me not to achieve my goal. And as we work backwards to that very inner self, all of a sudden, here's where the change really takes place. And once you make that change, now you start to work forward, but now you have it in writing as far as what steps need to happen in order to achieve that goal or that life.
Yeah, I mean, you really reverse engineering is that's really the key. Like I said, you really have to have that big vision. Like if you had, like if my favorite analogy is like if you were on a cruise ship and you see that horizon line where you don't see any land, but you know at some point as you continue to go further and further on the ship that you're getting closer and closer to that land. So that's kind of what your vision is. You're it's something that you can't necessarily see in a moment, but you're constantly working towards it. So if you don't have something that you are constantly working towards in life, because I mean it's we all have goals, and then it's like then at you might feel great for a month or whatever, and then it's like, all right, now it's time to set a new goal. It's kind of like winning the Super Bowl where everybody's all happy. You win the Super Bowl, great. We have a great week, go to the parade, and then all right, it's like now, all right, now it's time to get back to work. We have the draft now. We got free agency. That we it's kind of that same thing where you constantly need to have something that if you have a big vision, you constantly have something that you're working towards where it's almost like it's never ending.
Well, and as you're moving forward, as you're growing, I know that you talk a little bit about the importance of character. And as we talk about all of these different characteristics of who we are and who we choose to be can make such a difference. And so often, I don't know how often people actually sit back and observe their behavior and recognize that, what, when nobody's looking, what is your character versus what is your character when everybody's looking? What have you found that to be? And again, any stories that you can share with your experience of someone who you have worked with who really was struggling and yet through various steps that you helped them with overcame and became extremely successful in their business, in their leadership, in their life.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to like character is just a matter of can people trust you? And so I think that contrary to popular belief, especially America, sometimes what you do in private, it does have public implications. I mean, that's just the reality. As much as we try to act like it doesn't, it very much can. And so it's very important for us to really take time to really just kind of assess and be just recognize the person that we want to be remembered for, and just making sure that it's somebody just making sure that we're people that others can trust and that others want to follow. Because one thing about it is that when people trust you, once that trust is broken, it can be very, very difficult to get that trust back. And so I think it's very important that we have people that operating in good character, because that's just a demonstration that you're worthy of being trusted. I can think of an example of one person I was working with. He was having some issues. Basically, he was just struggling with his team, where he would get along with certain types of team members, and then other types of team members couldn't stay in his guts. And when we were working with each other and we really peeled back the layers, what we were finding was that obviously you have people that we are more comfortable working with, but the people that he was more comfortable working with, he was showing, and it was really all he was subconsciously showing them more favoritism than the people that he wasn't as comfortable working with. And there wasn't, I mean, the comfortability was really as simple as you have some people that kind of, you have some people that are just straight shooters where they just tell you like it is. They just and they just are very direct in the way in their approach. Where you have other people that are kind of like, walking on eggshells a little bit more of a softer approach and kind of easing you into what they want to say. And so when he was more comfortable with the people who would ease in, and so when people would shoot it to him straight, as we say, he felt some type of way. But we really had to, as I was having conversations with him and we're really peeling back the layers of these situations, it's really a matter of you just don't like their approach to give you the information. It's not that these people were like, they weren't even really disrespecting you. They weren't saying it in a way where it's like slander your name or trying to offend you. Like none of that was happening. It really was, these are just people who happen to be a little bit more direct. They were very respectful. It's not even, like I said, it's not even like they were getting disrespected or anything like that. So it's just really a matter of, again, that it all goes back to that self-discovery process. And I mean, I don't talk to anybody about things that I haven't really done for myself, because the reason I understand how important this self-discovery process is because of my own journey in terms of my self-discovery and my self-assessment process, because I haven't always thought this way myself. It's not a case of where I was born this way. You go through everybody kind of goes through their own journey where you get to a point where you have to confront this if you're not satisfied with where you are in life, you have to look inward and to see what's going on, because I mean, ultimately we are responsible for our own results and nobody else is going to ever care more than us. So that's why it's very important that we as individuals go through that self-discovery, that self-assessment process. And again, there's a number of different tools that are out there, but you really want to go through that process, and the preference is to have somebody walking you through that process.
Well, and as you're talking, I'm smiling here because I think about relationships, and as you talk about, here's someone that's a straight shooter, and here's someone that wants it a little softer. Even in personal relationships, a marriage, whatever that happens to be, so often we tend to be attracted to our opposites. So you have someone who's very much a straight shooter, loving that quietness, that person that's a little bit more gentle. And yet all of a sudden you get into life and your communication and what was most important to you now becomes the biggest challenge to you. And so how important do you think it is for someone to be able to say, number one, and I think there's two elements here. One, hey, communication. Vance, you're talking to me and you tend to be that straight shooter. And I tend to be a little bit more calm. When you talk to me, understand that this is just who I am. So as you're talking to me, I appreciate your straight shootingness, but could you just kind of make it a little bit more gentle for me? And at the same time, on the other note, I need to realize that, all right, you're a straight shooter. So when you do that, just sit back and go, okay, this is just who he is. It has nothing to do with me. So how do people go about doing that in a way that they hit those two elements so that the communication really begins to flourish, and all of a sudden you find a much better relationship in business as well as in life?
No, and it's funny you say that, because as you say that, I'm smiling because I think about, so I'm married. I've been married going on 2 years now. And prior to my wife, I actually was in a long-term relationship where we were actually engaged, and the engagement didn't work out. And after, we broke up, it wasn't really like kind of mutually decided that it didn't, we weren't going to continue the relationship. But after we broke up and I kind of had that period of self-assessment where it's like, just trying to figure out what worked, where she went wrong, what I could have done better, as I was looking at the things that just kind of assessing the totality of the relationship. What I recognize is that, so I'm a person that's kind of like a soft, like I have like a softer approach, but I also recognize that she had a softer approach. So in reality, there were conversations that we should have been having that from time to time we really were avoiding. And it's like, well, she's not going to bring it up. And she's probably like, he's not bringing it up. So it's fine. But in reality, it wasn't, which ended up part of the reason why we ended up breaking up. And so with my wife, it's the exact opposite, where I have a softer, like a softer, slow walking type of approach, but she is a straight shooter. And so me having that really puts me in a situation where she holds me accountable. It's the accountability piece is great. And then the other end of that is that, given that she is a straight shooter, there's times and situations where she needs to soften her approach. And so me having a softer approach, she's able to recognize situations where she needs to be a little bit softer, and maybe she needs to kind of exercise some restraint. And so it's like a give and take. And so me having that accountability, I'm able to more so I'm more prepared to recognize, even outside of my relationship with my wife, other situations, whether that be personally or professionally, where I really do have to have a more direct approach based on the result that I want to get. Because sometimes when you have to be direct, otherwise people are going to walk all over you. And then, like I said, on the other end, there are situations where that softer approach is going to come into play, because you being a straight shooter, you might end up offending somebody, or you might end up saying something that somebody, maybe because of their perspective, it rubbed them the wrong way, or they took it out of context in terms of a way that you didn't mean, but in reality, maybe you could have phrased it a little bit better or phrased it in a different way. So it's very important, like that give and take, and those opposite ends, that's been beneficial for even myself in my relationship.
Well, and as a parent, I've got 4 kids, and we laugh about it now. We have good relationships, but we talk about how as a parent, I was pretty much a straight shooter, and initially I didn't understand all of this stuff, and they sometimes felt really bad, really pushed, really all of that. And as we talk and laugh about it now, we recognize that, hey, Dad, that's just who you were, and that's who you are. And quite frankly, 3 of my children are more the soft approach, and I just have one son that's a straight shooter. And so it was fun as we went through behavioral management together and recognized that, okay, this is how we need to talk to each other, and this is also who we are. But I think one of the key points, because we talk about personality evaluations and so forth, realizing that, you know what, just because you do that, that doesn't mean that's who you are stuck in. Because
Right.
it's so important to realize that, hey, if I'm a straight shooter, I can learn to be more calm. I can learn to be more
Right.
quiet. I can approach things in a different way. And I think as we recognize that our strengths can become weaknesses if we take it too far, our weaknesses can become strengths if we learn to develop that.
Right. And yeah, and it just gets back to just recognizing those situations where you might have to adapt. So it's like, even we're talking about relationship, my wife, so she's a woman. I'm not going to talk to her in the same way that I talk to my friends, because my friends, maybe maybe we're joking and having, maybe we're having a conversation about something, and I'm you know how sometimes we have a tendency with our friends to kind of tread the line
Yeah,
of offense.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not going to. Maybe it might be in a sense a instance where it might be some slight offense on my friend, where it's like we can just kind of brush it off as men, where it's like, hey, we know, I know he's joking, but I'm not going to necessarily have that same approach for my wife because I might say something in a joking manner, but she might take it in a different way. But that's also that goes for many various relationships because we all have different perspectives, and so my perception of what might be funny might not be somebody else's perspective of what's funny. But what we have to do is just recognize that it doesn't necessarily mean I'm right or that other person's wrong. It's just a difference in perspective. So, and but the other part of that is that I'm just of the belief that you can't, I don't really believe you can tell somebody um, whether or not they should be offended because, again, we don't share the same perspective about everything as well. So, I might not agree with it. It might be something that I don't find is a big deal. I think that's a separate subject, but it just all comes into knowing who you are, and then the more you know who you are, the more especially your strong relationships, you're able to identify what types of personalities you're dealing with, whether it's your children, whether it's your friends, whether it's your spouse, and then just really meet people where they are. Because I think that that's the key. It's just understanding who you are so you can meet people where they are.
Well, and again, I think it goes to this whole concept of mindset, of awareness, of consciousness. And I think that's the key that people realize that, you know what, you just can't go through life unaware. You need to start to really think. You start to get some clarity. And as you do that, now you're on that step that we're talking about. So as we close, I'd like you to do two things. Number one, is there a message that you'd like to share with the audience? And then secondarily, how do people find you and what are some of the things that if they go to your website are there that might be of value to them?
Well, the message that I want to leave for people is to figure out what that thing is that you were born to do. Figure out what you were born to do. The late great Miles Monroe has a saying, which is one of my favorite phrases: your job is what you're paid to do, but your work is what you were born to do. And sometimes the two might be intertwined. Sometimes they might be separately, but fulfillment is in you being able to figure out what you were born to do.
All right. And how do
And
people find you?
yes, and for those who are interested in looking me up, it's simply www.vancecooper.com, www.vancecooper.com. That's where you can learn more about me. If you want to if you wanted to book a conversation, feel free to reach out to me via that channel. But that's really the easiest way to, and then it's connected to my social medias and everything as well. So www.vancecooper.com.
And you mentioned you have an ebook. What is that about and
Yes.
who would that be for?
Yeah, so I have an ebook called Time for Success, and that is for anybody that is just looking for some simple strategies to be able to manage their time a little bit better. Because as I said early in our conversation, I believe that one of the simplest fixes and easiest fixes that you can make is adjustments to your routine. And part of the reason that people feel so overwhelmed with routines and feel like they don't have enough time to accomplish things is because they have not looked at their daily habits. So that really just helps you, just gives you some practical steps to be able to look at your daily habits so that you're able to develop a routine that really sets you up for success.
Fantastic. Vance, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I did as well. Thank you very much for having me.
Really appreciate your insights. And folks, thanks for listening. I hope there's some value that you've gotten from this. Look forward to having you join us again soon. So this is Dr. Doug saying namaste.